And video 2 for today, we're going to do most of 12.3 notes for part 1. 12.3 has to do with measures of central tendency and dispersion. So in pre-algebra, you learned it more of measures of center and measures of spread or variability. So this is another way to phrase it. Measures of center are going to be your mean, median, and mode. It tells you more about the middle or center of your data. The measure that best describes a data set may depend on whether or not the data has an outlier. And just to review, an outlier is a data value that's much greater or much less than the other values in a set. So it can really throw off your measures if there is an outlier present. These should be very familiar. The mean or average, you add up all the data values and divide by the number of data values. This is the best measure used to describe the middle of a data set unless there's an outlier. One outlier can shift your entire average or mean, and it doesn't really give you much information about your data any longer. The median is the middle value. You want to make sure you arrange them in order, and then you can work your way towards the middle. If there are two middle numbers, which means that there's an even number of data values, then you actually find the average between the two middle numbers, and that's your median. And the median is used to describe the middle of a data set if there is an outlier, because an outlier won't shift your median. And the mode. This one last year I probably told you to kind of asterisk because it's a little bit different. The mode just tells you what occurs most often. There might not be one, there could be one, there could be multiple. And this is going to be the best data measure to use when there's non-numeric data or when you're just trying to choose the most popular. Okay. So in these notes for part 1 today and part 2 tomorrow, a lot of these examples ask you to describe which ones are the best. For the sake of us condensing, we're just going to be finding the measures. But it is a great skill to have to be able to argue which measures are better than others. So as we go through these notes, just remember that all you're going to be asked to do is to actually find mean, median, mode, and then here in a moment, range. So the rest is just more some enrichment for you. So problem 1 from page 739 in your book, we're going to find the measures of center. So mean, add all your data values. There's 8 of them total, so divide by 8. So your mean or average is 122. Your median, rewrite them in order. We end up with 2 middle numbers. So to find the true median, we have to find the average between the two numbers, or halfway between, which would be 111. In our mode, there is one in this data set. We have 3 values of 104, which is the most. So the mode would be 104. And then for the explaining portion, which this is extra for this year, because there's an outlier, if we look at our data here, all these are pretty low. 136 is starting to get pretty high, but then a huge jump to 189. That's an outlier. So since there's an outlier, the median would be the best measure. Okay. Got it 1. Same idea here. We're doing the same scenario as problem 1, only this time the outlier is gone. So notice how our values have shifted quite a bit. Our average went from 122 to 112.4. We find them using the same approach. What's nice here in the median is we now have an odd amount of numbers, so we don't have to use any extra steps there. The mode's not going to change. Because there's no outlier in this scenario, the mean would be the best. For now, we're going to skip got it 2. That's going to be on part 2 tomorrow. So the second half of these notes are measures of dispersion. You may also remember from last year, measures of spread, measures of variability. The only one we're going to look at today is range. So the range tells us the summary statistics that describes how dispersed or spread out the values are. You might recall from last year, we talked about the larger the range, the less consistent the data is because it's more spread out over a larger range of values. To find the range, you subtract the greatest and the lowest values. And a note here, this again is extra since we're condensing, but when asked to compare data sets using a measure of center, you're comparing the typical data value for each set, which is better than the other. When comparing the measure of dispersion, you're comparing how spread out the data is or deciding which is more or less consistent. So in Got It 3, this will look like a problem on your worksheet. The closing prices for 2 stocks of the first 5 days in February are shown. We're going to find the range and mean. Now we're going to compare in this example on your homework. You're not going to. So here are our data values. I found the ranges and the means. Okay, now to take this a step further, what this means is, on average, stock D had the higher closing price because 22 is clearly much higher than 6. However, it is less consistent than stock C because it covers a wider range of values. So it depends. Are you looking for consistency or higher average? In this case, probably higher average. And I have a note here. Generally, this refers to the last price at which a stock trades during a regular trading session. And a fun fact, in the US, the regular trading session typically runs from 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So just a little piece of information about how stocks work. And then from here on, the rest of the notes is going to be just some extension stuff since, again, we're condensing. These have to do with line plots, which we did quite a bit of last year in our statistics unit. As you read through them, just notice that with a line plot, you have to actually add up. So this would be 19 happening 4 times. So that's why I do 19 times 4. So it's a little bit more work when you're given the line plot. When you're asked to do any comparing, you're going to look at the clusters of data. So that's what I added in orange. Okay. So that's what these kind of go through. So if you want to spend a little extra time comparing different trends, that's what is happening in these last couple of examples. Okay, that wraps up today's notes and 12.3 notes. We will finish up 12.3 and do 12.4 tomorrow.